Welcome to this edition of Valor Media. This is episode number 50 for January 18th, 2021, and I'm your host, Mark Appenzeller. And today I'd like to shake things up just a little bit. I want to do things in a different order than what we normally do on this podcast. Now, if you are a frequent listener to Valor Media, you've probably noticed that we have sort of a set sequence of events as we move through these episodes. We generally present whatever the topic is that we'd like to talk about that day, and then once we're done, we move into a segment where we ask a few different questions, we do a few different wrap-up items. And one of the questions that we generally ask near the end is, do you have any suggestions for topics that you'd like us to talk about? Because at the end of the day, the podcast that we do here isn't for us. It's for you. And it takes us a lot of time to put the podcast together. We value and appreciate the fact that you invest your time in listening to it. So if we're not providing something for you that's valuable, we're just wasting your time and our time. So we always do ask that question, what would you like us to discuss? We also open up the floor for you to ask questions of us about either the current episode that you just heard or previous installments, because if there's something that you heard that you don't understand or you'd like to know more about, we certainly want to be able to provide that information to you. Well, today, instead of doing that at the end, I want to do that at the beginning, and that's for a couple of different reasons. Now, in a recent installment, I talked about why I think it's critically important for us in any kind of a business setting to move into 2021 with a determination that we will not stay in old ruts and just hope for the best. Now, even if our businesses appear to be going well, even if we're enjoying some level of success, it is very easy and very insidious to get locked into a mechanical approach. We do things by routine for so long that we kind of go into an autopilot mode. We don't really think anymore about what we're doing. Why should we? It appears to be working just fine. And it may be working just fine, but the thing is, we should never settle for just fine. Because if we do, we won't ever really grow as an organization. We'll never really expand our influence. We'll never be able to move into new areas. We can get away with that for a while. But eventually what happens is a stagnation sets in, and our staff members will start to lose focus. It's hard to keep people going year after year. You know, there's a scripture that says, for lack of a vision, the people cast off restraint. People will get lazy. They'll lose dedication to what they're doing. They won't invest themselves the way they used to if they don't really know what it's all about. So we do a huge disservice to ourselves when we get locked into that rut. So part of me moving that question up to the front of today's podcast is in that light. We don't always want to do things the same way. We don't want to be so routine dedicated that we become irrelevant. But I also wanted to ask the question up front because it segues into what I wanted to discuss in today's installment. Now, the question that we ask is going to be developed a little bit more today beyond what we generally do. And I specifically want to break it into 3 parts, and I'll explain why. Now, in just a couple of weeks, we will be coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Valor Media podcast, and that's hard to believe. When we were first developing this concept a little over a year ago and putting the initial notes together for it, we never really thought a whole lot about our geographical influence. And I think, at least from my perspective, I kind of envisioned us primarily serving our local area through this podcast. Now, Valor Ministries is a small nonprofit in a small city in western Maryland. Right where we are, we're just a few miles away from Pennsylvania, a few miles away from West Virginia, and just a little bit farther is Virginia. So you have all 4 of those states right there. There is a lot of overlap, particularly with Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And I think initially I thought, well, we'll probably get listeners in that area. But the amazing thing is, over the course of this last year, the Valor Media podcast has literally had a worldwide audience. Now, It's not a ton of listeners, and they haven't been consistent over the entire world, but we've had people from all kinds of different areas listen to this podcast. And sometimes you'll see a particular area represented for a while, then it may go away, and then it comes back. And just looking at the statistics for 2021, so far we've had listeners in Maryland, Virginia, California, and Ontario, Canada. Now, even Virginia, being a little bit farther away from us, is kind of interesting. California is extremely interesting because it's 3,000 miles away from us. It's literally on the opposite coast of the U.S. But the one that's completely mind-blowing to me is Ontario, Canada. I love Ontario. I have not been to Ontario for 40 years, which is amazing. I would love to go back someday. I know Ontario is very far away. It's just a completely different cultural setting. And so I'm always fascinated. Why are we getting listeners from places that shouldn't even really care about what we have to say? And so today, moving that question we normally ask at the end up to the beginning, I'd like to specifically direct it to the folks listening to us from California and from Ontario. And I'd like to extend this offer to you. If you would consider, could you send an email to us and answer 3 very simple questions? Because I would be really fascinated to know what your answers are. And the questions are this. How did you find the Valor Media podcast? Have you listened to more than one episode? And what is it about the podcast that's beneficial to you? Now, if you would be so kind and you would like to reach out to us, you can send it to the email address media@thevalorcenter.org. That's TheValorCenter.org. And I'm fascinated to know because, again, for California, for Canada, for any of the places around the world where we've had listeners, there's no logical reason for people from those places to listen to us, and yet for some reason they do. And the reason why it's important to us is because everything we do at Valor Ministries is based around serving people. And so we want to serve you. We want whatever we're doing to be relevant and beneficial for you. It really does come down to that whole idea of service. At the Valor Crisis and Training Center, which is really our main hub of operations, we work on a day-to-day basis with low-income clients. These are people who are facing real-life challenges. They're dealing with things like evictions and utility terminations. And we're there really trying to serve them, not to fix their problems, but to help move them out of the kinds of circumstances that caused that crisis to begin with. Sometimes we're able to financially assist them, but it goes way beyond that. We have a mentoring program, a personal development coaching program. We offer life skills classes where we teach things like relationship boundaries, money management, boundaries with kids. These are things that some folks simply never were taught. And by getting skills like that, it can really change the way someone looks at their circumstances. It can really give you a completely different perspective on how to structure your life, how to grow and move beyond the things that have held you down in the past. And because we are a nonprofit, we're not charging the people that we serve. And I use that word serve, and in a ministry context, that can sound very cliche. But even if you are in a business or an organization or a corporation where you have paying clients or paying customers, at the end of the day, you are still serving them, or at least you should be. Because it doesn't matter whether money ever changes hands. It really comes down to the fact that whatever we do in our businesses, and whatever that looks like, it should really be about giving people something that causes them to be in a better position when they leave us than they were when they first came. We have to be intentional and focused about that to make that happen. And a huge part of that involves getting feedback from the people we serve, which is why I asked the questions that I asked just a minute ago, because we want to know how to serve the people who we are interacting with. And in whatever your sphere is, you should have that same purposefulness. You want to know, am I doing a good job? And if I'm not, what am I doing wrong? You know, it's interesting today because I don't know about you, but it seems like everywhere you turn, we're besieged with questionnaires and surveys. And a lot of times that can happen if you purchase something online, and within a few minutes on your phone, there'll be a pop-up. Take this short survey and you're eligible to be entered to win whatever. And I usually look at things like that, and particularly the ones that promise me the possibility of winning something, and I think, nah, thanks anyway. Because there are probably 10 million other people that just got that same survey, so my chances of actually winning something are probably minuscule. And for me, I could literally care less about winning something. If I'm completing a survey, the only reason I would do it would be because I wanted to actually give my input to that company in the hopes that they would take it to heart and make some sort of a change. But the problem is, I'm really cynical about these surveys and questionnaires because at the end of the day, in my opinion, they're just being generated by some algorithm. That algorithm knows that I just bought something or clicked on something, and so poof, instant questionnaire, instant survey. And even if I take my time and fill it out, I really don't think anybody is ever going to read it. And in the remote chance that they do read it, they're probably never going to do anything about it. And I think that is really a shame. You know, way back in the early 1970s, my brother and I used to read Mad magazine. It was kind of a silly publication, but it was pretty funny. And they used to do this installment that was called Scenes We'd Like to See. And I remember this one that they did one time that was called X-Ray Scenes We'd Like to See. And it was basically these single-frame cartoons that were depicting just average daily life situations. And then in the cartoon, there would be like an X-ray vision cutaway view where you were seeing inside of or behind something and really getting a glimpse at the inner workings behind the scenes. And a really funny one that I remember showed this very exclusive, expensive-looking department store. And there was this well-dressed lady with a diamond necklace, and she had just dropped a suggestion form into a box on the wall. She was turning to walk away. She had this very pleased, very contented look on her face, as if she was thinking, oh, I'm dropping my suggestion in here and the store will find ways to serve me even better. And up above the box on the wall, there was a sign that said, for better service, drop your suggestions here. Well, then you had the X-ray cutaway view of what was going on inside the suggestion box. And you could see in the normal view the top of the suggestion form she had just dropped in there. But in this cutaway view, you saw she was dropping it into a paper shredder. And it was literally chewing her suggestion to bits. Of course, she had no idea that that was happening. She was walking away thinking, what a nice store. They are actually looking for input from me. And see, unfortunately, cynical me, I think that's what happens most of the time in this digital realm with these surveys, because I just don't see things improving in most cases. It's very rare that you complete something like that and actually get a response from someone or actually see some modification in your commerce experience in the future that makes you think, oh, they cared about what I had to say. And that's really sad. And I've seen that play out in situations over the last 6 months or so. My wife and I have utilized 2 different services for at-home restaurant delivery. Now, in the U.S., we have these third parties that will basically contract with restaurants, and that can be local mom and pop establishments, it can be nationwide chains. But what happens is the third party will essentially work with the restaurant to do the delivery of whatever food you order. So you pay the third party a membership fee. They have their own portal. You log into it, and when you do, you have access to menus for all of the restaurants that they contract with. So you submit your order for whatever it is that you want to have delivered, and then the restaurant is actually coordinating with that third party to do the delivery. Now, in concept, it sounds wonderful because they have a little graphic on there. When you submit the order, it will show you the progress of your order from the initial receipt until it's delivered. It will identify the first name of whoever your delivery driver is, and it will give you the projected delivery time. Again, sounds great. But what ends up happening sometimes is there's a huge disconnect between the restaurant and this delivery entity. And we had an experience just a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday evening. We placed an order, and it was kind of a little bit later in the evening, and my wife and I eat late anyway, so it was no big deal. But at the point we submitted the order, it told us it would be an hour and a half until it got delivered. And I thought, well, that's fine. So we submitted it. We saw the confirmation there. But what ended up happening was, after about an hour, my wife checked the computer again, and the status still just said order received. Now, it should have at least been in process at this point. So she tried to contact the delivery driver because you can normally do that. And normally, it'll even have the GPS on the delivery person's phone so that you can see their progress on a map. You know where they are, how far away they are from your house. But there was nothing like that. It looked like nothing had happened, and she could not get in touch with the delivery person. Well, by now it was within 15 minutes of the original delivery time. So my wife called the restaurant. She talked to somebody there, and the person said, "Oh, yeah, your food's been sitting here for a long time. The delivery person never came." And then they went and did a little bit more research, and as it turned out, apparently the delivery company had to substitute drivers. But I was really frustrated because I thought, well, why did nobody at the restaurant question, why has this delivery order been sitting here for an hour? So finally, this second delivery person got involved, and we finally ended up getting our food after about 2 hours. And when it was delivered, it was just barely lukewarm. And my wife and I are very flexible with food preparation and service and delivery. We're not the kind of people to make a big deal about things. We're very forgiving. But I thought it was really poor. I thought it was poor for both of those companies, for the delivery entity and also for the restaurant. We had another experience a little bit further back where we had a delivery from a restaurant, and it was legitimately terrible. Everything about the processing of the order, the delivery, even the processing of our payment, everything that could possibly be wrong was wrong. So my wife reached out to the restaurant. She wasn't nasty, she wasn't demanding, she wasn't rude, but she very clearly spelled out the areas where their service failed us. And we got this incredibly nasty defensive response from the owner of the restaurant. And he basically was outraged that we were questioning anything. And I look at things like that and I just think, who in their right mind would think that that's the way to run a business? How do you think that's benefiting you? If you're not willing to listen to legitimate, valid feedback from your paying customers, how do you ever hope to really prosper or grow or even be there in 3 years? And the sad thing is, I think that whole concept of actually caring about the people that you serve just completely eludes the minds of many people in businesses. And that is really tragic because asking for feedback from somebody costs you nothing, but it can be a gold mine of valuable information for you, whether you're a sole proprietor, business owner, or just somebody on a team somewhere, in a department somewhere. Businesses need to care about the level of service that they're providing people. They need to ask questions. And this is the most important part. They need to be thick-skinned enough, not go on the defensive, not go on the offensive. They need to be willing to say, yeah, maybe we did drop the ball. And beyond just acknowledging error, they need to take some legitimate step toward correcting whatever those problems are. If possible, that can involve something like maybe reducing the price of whatever the service was. Like for us, with that messy order that took 2 hours to get there and then arrived almost cold, it wouldn't have killed the restaurant or the delivery service to have knocked a couple of bucks off our order. But they didn't do it. There was barely any, oh, I'm sorry about that. It was just basically sort of, you just have to deal with it. That's just the way it is. That's a terrible, terrible way to do business. So today I want to encourage you, in whatever your business looks like, care passionately about what the people you serve are thinking. Ask them and be willing to hear some hard truths. If you are doing a terrible job, you deserve to know. And you should care enough to make changes so that you do a better job as you go forward. Now, there are so many different ways that you can gather information from the people that you serve. Sometimes at the Valor Crisis and Training Center, we use detailed surveys where we ask specific questions and we tabulate the responses so that we can look at trends. It doesn't have to be that long and involved. It can be as simple as, is everything correct in your order? Is there anything else I can do for you? Is this what you needed? But how many times do we see situations where even something that simple doesn't happen? I really firmly believe if you embrace this concept, you will be leaps and bounds ahead of so many other businesses or organizations because most people don't do this. I don't know why they don't. I don't know why they wouldn't want to. If you do this, it will give you such an advantage because you will automatically be aware of what is going on. And again, it's like I said earlier about these ruts that we get into in our businesses. If we're sort of coasting along and we think everything is okay, maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. And I would much rather know if I'm doing something wrong while I'm doing it than find out the hard way. Because in our businesses, if we don't do that, what could end up happening is one minute we're sailing along at 30,000 feet, and the next minute we're plowing through the debris looking for the black box so we can take a look at our flight trajectory to figure out what in the world caused us to plummet. Don't assume that everything is always going to be great just because it seems to be okay right now. You need to get that feedback on an ongoing basis. And even if you're dealing with something that's not necessarily going to cause your company to fall apart, it still is valuable to you to know what can we do differently as we move forward. Because you should care about growing and developing and moving into new areas. And the only way that you can really validly know how to do that is to find out what people need and want. Otherwise, it's just a shot in the dark. You may as well just put different things up on the wall and throw a dart. You want to be specific. You don't want to waste your time and your resources. You want to know what areas you really should be focusing on. And you can do that if you take the time to really ask the people you serve, what do you think? I hope this was beneficial for you today. And I want to encourage you to get a deeper perspective on how we do things at Valor Ministries, what we are all about. Please check us out on Facebook at Valor Ministries and Valor XL, and visit our websites www.thevalorcenter.org and www.valorxl.com. I'd also like to point you to a really great resource. Our executive director, Lori Riston, just recently published a book that's available on Amazon.com, and it's called You Were Made to Thrive, 7 Strategies to Move You from Crisis to Thriving. That should be our goal on a personal level. It should be a goal for us on our business level. We want to help you thrive in whatever way we can. And that includes your own personal life, your own personal growth. And you will hear us repeatedly in this podcast talk about our purpose as an organization, which is serving people, but doing it by serving Jesus Christ. Do you need prayer? Do you have questions about what this whole faith thing is? Who is Jesus and why should I care? If you have questions, we want to help. And we encourage you, please reach out to us at info@thevalorcenter.org. And someone from the Valor Ministries team will get back in touch with you. We can pray with you. We can talk with you. We can give you resources and guidance to help point you in the right direction, to move you into the abundant life that Jesus said he came to give to us. Now, if the Valor Media Podcast is a blessing to you, would you consider financially supporting us so that we can continue week after week to bring you this kind of content? If so, you can make your generous, tax-deductible donation securely online by going to www.thevalorcenter.org/donate, or you can send a check or money order to Valor Ministries, 324 East Antietam Street, Suite 104, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21740. thank you so much for joining me today. Please come back next week, and please follow or subscribe to this podcast. We have a lot of great content coming in the weeks and months ahead, so please join us each week. And please remember this: Jesus Christ loves you. He wants you to have abundant life because you were made to thrive.